A.2 Structure of XML. First, let's look at the basic structure of XML tree structure. So let us just use a simple example to look at that XML tree structure. The tree structure starts at the root. So there is a root on top of the tree, then branches down and reach the bottom. There are many leaves at the bottom. Okay? So a hierarchical structure. So use that tree structure way to organize the data. So look at a simple example we used in the previous video, that bookstore example. So you can see, so from this example you can see the root. The bookstore, this element is the root. Okay? The first line is not. So later we will talk about the first line. The version, we'll talk about that later. So other than that, so we do not include that in the tree structure. All right. So there is a perfect tree, so you can construct all that. So this is the visual display of the tree structure. In this one, you can see, other than the usual nodes, the parent node, element, relationship, branches, right? The leaf nodes, right? Many. There are some other special thing, attributes. For some of the elements, there are attributes associated with the elements. So that's special. Because the attribute of one element, so we do not treat it as a regular node. So it's something like the data attached to a node. So a special kind of data attached to a node. Because for the node, we want to use element as the node. So then we can use a uniform description of our nodes. Each node in the tree has the uniform structure, right? So that probably is important. But for attribute, it is attached to a node. So it is not, it itself is not a node. So it is used to modify a node. So that's why this tree is a special tree. All right. Then let's look at some XML syntax rules. XML document must contain one root element. The tree, so here you can see, it is pretty strict. The rules, format used for XML documents, very strict. So we will have several rules you need to follow. That is the parent of all other elements. On top, parent, ancestor, more precisely, ancestor of all other elements. Then prologue, the special name for the top line. The XML prologue is optional. You do not have to include it, but usually people include that. Okay? If it exists, it must come first in the document. This is that special line, prologue. But here you can see the version still uses 1.0. Still, we know the version 1.0 started from 1998. So after that, so you can see not much changes, not many changes, you know. There's still 1.0 because we know the structure after it was defined. People feel, yep, so that's pretty much what we need. No significant change, right? No significant changes. So that's why right now we still use the 1.0 version. Then encoding, UTF-8 format, character encoding, character set encoding format. So we will discuss that later, soon. So the meaning, Unicode transformation format. Here first you need to understand this Unicode. So what is a Unicode? So if you took the Java class, so you may heard of that. You may hear of that. Yeah, Java class. In Java class, Java character. So Java uses Unicode to represent its characters, Unicode characters. Yeah, but here I will look at some other things about this format. UTF-8 is the default encoding for HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, XML, and SQL. Yeah. So you know, it is a very important format for all those technologies, fundamental basic technologies. People like to use this format. Now let me give you some simple description of this Unicode, UTF-8 format. Because UTF-8, there is another one, UTF-16. But here we just talk about UTF-8. It is a variable with the character used, the number of bits used to represent character is not fixed. Variable width, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Variable width character encoding used for electronic communication. So we need to know a little bit more information. Capable of encoding how many characters? So look at this number. 1 million, okay? More than 1 million valid character code points in Unicode. So that's the first reason why people use this Unicode format. The reason is they can represent more characters for internationalization of applications. So why Java used Unicode? The reason, when Java was designed targeting the whole world, so not just one country, U.S. here, English-speaking countries, not just that, targeting whole world. So internationalization was a big consideration when Java was designed. So it adopted this Unicode at that time. So 1 million possible characters can be represented. So it can cover all the languages in the world. All the languages in the world. So enough characters. So 1 million characters. So you can think about that. Yeah. Before that, most of the programming languages just use the ASCII code. ASCII code. Yeah. Less than, because 1 byte using ASCII code, only 1 byte. 200 255. You can only represent different characters up to this small number, 255 or 56. Just one more. 256, just one more. Okay? Not many. Enough for English language. Only enough for English language. That's it. If you add one more language, you don't have that many characters to represent. All right, so that's the reason we, software encoding method adopts Unicode way. All right. Then, all right, the structure, one of the 4 1-byte code units. The structure. How do you represent one character point code, right? One character code point. Here, character code points. 1. Right? 1 to 4 bytes. Okay? The first type, 1 byte. 1 byte. 8 bits. 8 bits. 1 byte, 8 bits. Okay? So that's why this 8, where this 8 comes from, 8 bits. So each unit we use 8 bits. Okay? Then, because this one you cannot represent it, so this part corresponds to ASCII code. Okay? ASCII code. All right. 2 bytes. Yeah. If you do not have enough memory, then use 2 bytes. So you can cover more characters. Then you still not you need to represent more characters, 3 bytes. Okay? Then the last one, 4 bytes. Okay. All right. So that's the way you represent characters in Unicode format. Okay. And because remember that backward compatibility consideration, right? Yeah. So you want to, when you switch to Unicode, so you still want to make it support ASCII code easily, right? So you reserve this 1 byte way to the ASCII code, ASCII format. 1 byte, yeah. A single byte way, use it for the original ASCII code. Yeah. No change. After that, non-ASCII code, so then the remaining non-ASCII characters remaining. You have plenty of them, so you can represent all languages, dialects, whatever exists in the world, you can find, can all be represented. All right, so that's this encoding. Yeah, so that's enough. This background enough. We do not need to go more than that. Yeah. Another rule. XML tags are case sensitive. That's different from HTML. HTML is not case sensitive. So capital, lower, the same tag. In XML, all elements must be properly nested within each other. Properly nested. So you can see the format much stricter than that of HTML, because it needs to support many different software application tools. So you need to make it very strict. Otherwise you have trouble. Okay? It will increase the processing cost. All right, some simple example. So look at this one. This one you can see not properly nested. So look at this I tag, italic font style, and this boldface B, the B should be outside of that I tag, properly nested, but it's not. But this is okay in HTML. So the browser can understand it. Even this is not a good way, the browser won't complain. The browser can still display it correctly. But if you want to make it work in XML applications, you have to make it properly nested. So that's that problem. So in XML, the attribute values must always be potent. So this is different from HTML. HTML, sometimes we do not need to quote attribute values under some conditions. Remember some conditions? Space character and some other special characters. If you do not have those characters, then you do not have to use quotes. But in XML, you have to use the quotes to enclose the attribute values. All right. More properties of XML. All right. First, let's look at the XML entities. HTML entities, we know HTML entities, right? There are a large number of HTML entities. I don't know how many, just based on my impression, hundreds of HTML entities. But in XML, only 5 predefined entities. So these entities, the same as those in HTML. So that means we use the same HTML entities corresponding to these 5 symbols. Less than, greater than, ampersand, HTML weight. Here, HTML weight, right? HTML entity weight. Apostrophe, apostrophe, this way. Quote, double quote, here's that. Only 5, see? It's enough, see? For this part, it's much simpler than that, the corresponding part of HTML. All right. Syntax, the comments. Comments similar to that of HTML. We use the HTML style comments. Okay? But there is one rule for it. You cannot the double dashes in the middle of the comment. You cannot do that. Double dash in the middle, because the double dash is used to mark the end of the comment. So you do not want to make the interpretation tools get confused. All right. Next, another different property compared with the HTML. Multiple white spaces. In HTML, when you have multiple spaces, you truncate. You only keep the first one. You only keep one. So then you truncate the remaining white spaces. But XML, you keep all of them. Why XML keeps all the white space characters? Because XML, so that's why our part 1, background, is important. So we need to understand using the background in our video 8.1. Because the purpose of XML for the content of the data, the focus is at the content of the data. So you do not want to change the content. Multiple white spaces, that's the part of the content. So you have no reason to change the content of the data. Other people, they need multiple white space characters for their specific applications. So if you change that part, you may change something very important. So that's not good. Yeah. But why for HTML it can change that truncate? Because HTML, remember, its focus is for the data display. When you display data, when you have multiple space characters, so you may feel, so that's not good way for display, right? Yeah. So it just compress it, okay? Compress it for that. Because in your HTML document, sometimes you use space characters to format your lines. But at the display side, you don't really want to display in that way. Right? So that's different. So that's why HTML way is quite different, because the display is its main focus. All right. Another one. XML documents that conform to the syntax rules above are said to be well-formed. Here we just use this name, this phrase, well-formed XML documents, because this concept is important for XML documents. Otherwise, you have big consequence. If you do not make your XML document well-formed, you will suffer some serious consequence. So I will talk about that in our last video, 8.3. All right, so let's finish 8.2 first.